Ah, so the shadows finally found you, curious enough to see what lurks beyond the lies. They thought they could hide. They thought they could lie, but you saw right through them. You didn't need cameras. You didn't need evidence. You had something far more powerful. You had the ability to read the cracks in their voice, the hesitation in their eyes, the tremor in their silence, while the rest of the world got blinded by words. You were listening to the truth between the lines, and that unsettled them. Because when someone realizes you're not fooled by the mask, when they see you're watching the patterns, the details, the subtle moves they thought were invisible, they panic. That's why they whisper about you now. That's why they joke nervously, "Are you trained in mind games?" Because the way you can dissect a lie, the way you can predict their next move before they even make it, it feels uncanny. It feels formidable. The truth is, you were never trained in their institutions. You weren't taught in their systems. What forged you was far harsher. Betrayal, silence, observation. You learned to read people not because you wanted to, but because you had to. Survival demanded it, and when survival becomes your teacher, you learn at a level no one else can replicate. You see the contradiction in their smile. You catch the tremble in their tone. You notice the delay before their answer. Every micro-expression is a confession. Every hesitation a secret spilling. They can't hide from you anymore, because you've become fluent in the unspoken language of truth. And that's the power they respect and fear. So when they say, "It's like you're reading my mind," they're not exaggerating. They're confessing. They're admitting you're 10 steps ahead, and that unsettles them more than anything else ever could. It's funny, isn't it? They spend their whole lives believing they're clever, believing they can manipulate, deceive, twist words into knots so tight no one can untangle them. But then they meet you, and suddenly their little tricks don't work anymore. You don't fall for the sweet talk. You don't get blinded by charm. You don't swallow the excuses, because you don't listen to what they say. You listen to what they're hiding. That's the real advantage. Most people are trapped in surface-level conversation, distracted by tone, blinded by performance. You, though, you've trained your eye to look past the mask. You've trained your ear to hear the hesitation. You've trained your gut to feel the truth. That's why the room changes when you walk in. That's why they shift uncomfortably, why their laughter feels forced, why their confidence suddenly cracks. Because deep down, they know you've already seen through them. You've already mapped out their intentions before they could even speak. And nothing unsettles a liar more than someone who won't play along with the script. That's why they compare you to mind games. Because mind games aren't about weapons. They're about influence. They're about understanding someone without ever needing to push them. And you've mastered that naturally, not by studying books or secret training manuals, but by living through storms that forced you to see people exactly as they are, not as they pretend to be. Think about it. How many times did you sit in silence, watching someone's story unravel without them even realizing it? How many times did you predict the ending long before the truth came out? That wasn't luck. That wasn't coincidence. That was discipline. That was survival. That was you sharpening your instincts until they became razor sharp. And now they don't just see you as a person. They see you as a mirror they can't control, a mirror that reflects their games, their deceit, their lies, and that reflection, it unsettles them. Here's the part they'll never admit out loud. People are terrified of being seen. Not admired, not liked, seen. Because when you strip away the image, the mask, the carefully curated identity, most of them are hollow. And you don't get distracted by the glitter. You don't chase the smoke. You pierce straight through the fog and uncover the truth. That's why conversations feel different with you. They start light, playful, casual, but within minutes they're sweating. Why? Because you're not buying the surface story. You're tracking the rhythm of their words, the gaps between their sentences, the inconsistencies hiding inside their own voice. Every detail is a thread, and you've learned how to pull until the whole thing unravels. And the beauty of it? You don't even have to try anymore. Your silence does half the work. You let them talk, and the more they talk, the more they reveal. Because guilty people can't sit in silence. They need noise. They need distraction. They need to keep throwing words at you, hoping one will stick. But you just sit there, calm, quiet, studying. And that stillness, that stillness unsettles them faster than any interrogation ever could. That's why the whispers started. That's why the comparisons to mind games aren't a joke anymore. Because what you do naturally feels overwhelming to them. You don't scream, you don't threaten, you don't fight. You observe, and in observation you guide. You hold the silence until it exposes their performance. You hold the eye contact until it pierces through their facade. You hold your ground until the ground beneath them feels unsteady. And then, in that moment of panic, when they realize they can't fool you, can't bend you, can't blind you, they falter. Not with explosions, not with chaos, but with the quiet precision of someone who already knows the ending before the story begins. But let's be honest, it wasn't always like this. You weren't born with this clarity. You weren't gifted this vision. No, it was carved into you the hard way. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every broken promise trained your focus. Every fake smile forced you to study deeper, to stop taking people at face value and start dissecting their patterns. Pain was your teacher. Silence was your classroom. Nights alone, wondering why their words never matched their actions. That's where your instincts were born. You didn't study mind games manuals. You studied disappointment. You didn't read theory, you read people. And slowly, piece by piece, you built an internal radar so sharp it can detect lies before the liar even finishes speaking. That's why you confuse them now. They can't figure you out. To them, it looks like magic, like sorcery, like some secret training. But to you, it's just survival. It's just scars turned into sensors, wounds turned into wisdom. And the truth? That's more powerful than anything they'll ever understand. Because their training is mechanical. Yours is emotional. Theirs is structured. Yours is raw. They were taught in controlled environments. You were forged in chaos. That's why it feels surgical. Because what you do dismantles masks with a glance. You collapse lies with a single pause. You turn silence into insight and observation into influence. They call it manipulation. You call it awareness. And awareness, that's the real edge. Not fists, not threats, not status. Awareness. Knowing the game so well you can't be played anymore. Seeing the board so clearly, you're always 3 moves ahead. That's what separates you now. That's why you're formidable. Because while they're busy rehearsing lines, you've already written the ending. Silence. That's your strength. The kind they'll never understand until it's too late. See, anyone can throw words, anyone can shout, anyone can try to intimidate. But silence? Silence is influence. It's presence. And you've mastered it. Most people falter when silence enters the room. They rush to fill it with noise, excuses, empty promises. But you let it hang heavy, sharp, compelling. You let them wrestle with their own thoughts, their own overthinking, their own cracks. And without lifting a finger, without saying a word, you watch them reveal themselves. That's why they call it mind games. Because you don't need to fight to win. You don't need to shout to dominate. You just exist in the moment with so much clarity, so much presence that they unravel. They fold. They give themselves away. And by the time they realize what's happening, it's already over. Think about it. How many times have you walked into a room and felt the shift? The way conversations cut short, the way eyes dart away, the way nervous laughter tries to fill the void. That's not coincidence, that's influence. That's the unspoken acknowledgement that you're not someone they can manipulate, not someone they can deceive. You're the storm they pretend not to notice, but can't ignore. And here's the deepest truth. You don't even want to use it. You're not here to control them. You're not here to break them. You're here to protect your peace. But in a world built on illusions, protecting your peace feels like power. Your silence becomes a lens. Your stillness becomes a mirror. Your discipline becomes influence. And that's why they respect you. Not because you're violent, not because you're loud, but because you've proven the most formidable force in any room isn't chaos. It's calm, clarity, and presence. But here's the paradox. This gift, this awareness, it doesn't come without a cost. Because once you see people clearly, once you learn to read the cracks in their masks, you can never unsee it. You can't go back to blind trust. You can't pretend you don't notice the hesitation, the inconsistency, the lie hidden inside the smile. And that's where the isolation begins. Because while everyone else is laughing, joking, falling for the performance, you're silent. You're watching. You're seeing the strings behind the puppet show. And deep down, you realize you're not part of their game anymore. You're above it, outside it, beyond it. It's a lonely place to stand, but it's also the highest ground. Because while they play checkers with emotions and illusions, you're playing chess with silence and strategy. They think they're fooling you. They think they're winning. But you've already read the patterns, and you don't even need to act to stay ahead. That's the power that makes them whisper, "Who trained you?" They can't accept that your clarity wasn't taught. It was earned. They can't accept that the scars they left you with became your radar. They can't accept that the solitude they forced on you became your training ground. But that's the irony, isn't it? The very things that were supposed to break you are the things that built you. The betrayals gave you vision. The silence gave you patience. The pain gave you discipline. And now, when they look at you, they don't just see a person. They see someone untouchable, and that's what really unsettles them. Because they can't manipulate you. They can't deceive you. They can't own you. And when someone realizes they have no influence over you, that's when the fear sets in. Not fear of who you were, fear of who you've become. Isolation. Most people run from it. They drown it out with noise, with distractions, with anyone who can fill the silence. But you embraced it. You let the quiet sharpen you. You let the stillness strip away the illusions. You stopped begging for company and started building in solitude. And that was the turning point. Because when you're alone long enough, you stop performing. You stop wearing masks. You face yourself, raw, unfiltered, unmasked. That's where your real training happened. Not in their schools, not in their systems, but in those nights where the silence was so heavy it forced you to either break or evolve, and you chose evolution. That's why you move the way you do now. That's why you carry yourself with that calm, that precision, that presence. Because you're not chasing validation anymore. You're not explaining yourself anymore. You're not begging for understanding anymore. You've grown past it. You've become something most people can't even recognize, let alone replicate. And the beauty of it? Isolation didn't make you weaker. It made you untouchable. While they searched for comfort, you built discipline. While they drowned in noise, you mastered silence. While they played games, you studied the players. And now you walk into every room with an advantage no one can take. Self-control. That's why your energy feels different. That's why they glance twice, why they whisper, why they sense something powerful in you. Because what you've built in the dark radiates in the light. They can feel it. They can't name it, but they know it. And it rattles them. Because when a person learns to master themselves, when they learn to sit with pain, silence, and solitude without breaking, what can the world possibly use against them? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The battlefield was never physical. It was always psychological. And you figured that out long before they did. See, most people waste their strength fighting on the surface. They argue. They shout. They clash head-on, thinking volume equals victory. But you went deeper. You learned the real challenge happens in the mind, in silence, in the split second before a decision is made. That's where you dominate. Not by brute force, but by precision. You don't react, you observe. You don't chase, you calculate. You don't get dragged into their chaos. You watch them unravel within it. And that patience, that control, that ability to sit still while they falter, that's what unsettles them. Because here's the secret. People reveal everything when they think you're not reacting. They keep talking, they keep exposing, they keep slipping, and all the while, you're 3 moves ahead, already predicting the outcome. That's why you feel like a storm to them. You don't come loud, you come inevitable. And this is where psychology turns into power. You've realized the game isn't about convincing them. It's not about proving yourself. It's about control of yourself first, and of the space second. You've turned discipline into influence. You've turned silence into strategy. You've turned awareness into an advantage. That's why the comparisons to mind games stick. Because you don't just win arguments, you guide the entire energy. You dictate the tempo. They're playing inside your world, by your rules, without even realizing it. And the more they resist, the deeper they sink. And the irony? You don't even need to dismantle them. You just let them reveal who they are. You just hold the mirror steady, and most can't handle the weight of their own reflection. Once someone crosses your path, they're never the same again. Because you don't just enter their life, you change it. You leave a mark so sharp, so undeniable, that even in your absence you linger. They replay the conversations. They analyze the silences. They question the lies they told because deep down, they know you noticed. That's why you're unforgettable. Not because you screamed the loudest, not because you demanded attention, but because you revealed truth without ever raising your voice. You showed them what real awareness looks like. You showed them what self-control feels like. And people don't forget that. They can't. It lingers in their mind. Your silence echoes louder than their excuses. Your absence cuts deeper than their betrayal. They scroll through the old messages. They replay the old moments. But nothing feels the same. Because what they're missing isn't comfort. It's clarity. And clarity can't be replaced once it's been revealed. That's what makes you formidable now. You don't chase. You don't beg. You don't force. You disappear. And in that disappearance, you become larger than life. They'll call you cold. They'll call you heartless. They'll say you've changed. But the truth, you finally stopped betraying yourself to keep them comfortable. And that transformation, it unsettles them. Because once someone has seen you rise from the silence, they know they'll never get the old version of you back. That version is gone, and in its place stands something sharper, stronger, untouchable. That's why the comparisons to mind games won't stop. Because you don't just live, you leave an impression. You don't just walk away, you leave echoes, and echoes last longer than presence. Here's the climax, the moment they finally realize the truth. You can't be controlled anymore, not by guilt, not by manipulation, not by empty promises. You've seen too much. You've endured too much. You've trained too much in the silence of your own mind to ever fall back into their traps. And that's the real power, freedom. Because control only works on the unaware. Manipulation only works on the desperate. Lies only work on the blind. But you're none of those anymore. You've built an awareness so sharp it slices through every performance before it even begins. That's why they panic. That's why they whisper. That's why they compare you to forces they fear but can't name. Because you embody the one thing they'll never have. Discipline. You don't need their approval. You don't crave their validation. You don't beg for their loyalty. You stand alone, unshaken, unstoppable. And here's the twist. They'll test you again. They'll come back with softer tones, with sweeter words, with new masks. But this time, you won't fold. This time, you won't bend. This time, you'll see it for exactly what it is. A trap dressed as love. A chain disguised as comfort. And instead of falling, you'll smile, you'll nod, and you'll walk away. Because the real victory isn't in proving them wrong. It's in proving yourself right. Proving that you are always stronger than their games, always sharper than their lies, always destined to rise beyond their reach. That's the outcome they never see coming. Not rage, not chaos, not destruction, but evolution. And evolution can't be stopped. Not by them, not by anyone. This is the break point, the moment. You stop being a character in their story and start becoming the author of your own. For too long, you played the role they wrote for you. The loyal one, the forgiving one, the dependable one. But those scripts, they were cages disguised as love, and you finally burned them. Now every step you take is written by your own hand. No more waiting for their approval. No more bending to fit their comfort. No more shrinking so they could feel bigger. You've erased their lines, their expectations, their control. And what remains is a blank page, yours. And that blank page unsettles them. Because it means they can't predict you anymore. They can't manipulate you anymore. They can't bend your kindness to their advantage anymore. You've cut the strings. You've left the stage. You've walked off their play. And in doing so, you've made them irrelevant. That's why they'll talk. That's why they'll twist the narrative. That's why they'll try to paint you as the villain. Because when people lose control of you, they lose the version of themselves they built around you. And instead of admitting their weakness, they blame your strength. But you don't care anymore. Their words, background noise, their lies, smoke in the wind. You don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to prove anything. Because real power isn't about proving, it's about moving. Moving forward, moving higher, moving in silence, while they choke on their own confusion. And that's the mark of someone untouchable. You don't just survive betrayal, you turn it into fuel. You don't just escape the game. You build a new arena where only discipline, clarity, and truth can survive. And in that arena, you reign. And now here you stand, not broken, not bitter, but reborn. The same silence they once mistook for weakness has become your fortress. The same pain they tried to bury you in has become your foundation. And the same solitude they laughed at has become your strength. You're not the same person they left behind. That version of you is gone, buried, burned, erased in the fire of your evolution. What stands here now is something colder, sharper, untouchable. A presence that doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. A presence that doesn't beg for attention. It commands it. They'll feel it. They'll whisper about it. They'll swear you've changed. And they'll be right. Because you no longer play their games. You no longer explain your worth. You no longer hand out access like it's free. You've become scarce, and scarcity unsettles people who once thought you'd always be there. That's why the comparisons will never stop. Mind games, shadows, influence. They're just trying to name what they can't define. Your discipline, your clarity, your control. They don't understand how you survived the fire and came out stronger. They don't understand how you turned silence into power. They don't understand how you stopped needing them. And that's exactly why they'll never forget you. And that's your victory. Not rage, not chaos, but peace. A peace so strong it echoes louder than their betrayal. A peace so sharp it lingers in every memory they have of you. A peace that makes you untouchable. So walk forward. Don't look back. Don't explain. Don't pause. Just vanish into the silence you've mastered. And let that silence leave an impression they can't shake. Because in the end, you didn't just survive their story. You rewrote your own.